Hey Wired, welcome. It is so good to see you, man. We are continuing on in our Lifeline series. We've already touched on two things. One, that godly friendships never leave us alone. We saw just a story. I talked about my friend Tim, about how in my darkest moment, he was there for me with love, with encouragement, with support. And then we talked about how godly friendships help us grow, that you can grow with godly friends and they will always get you on the right path and they will always point you to Jesus. See, the reality is that God designed us to have friendships. But what do those friendships look like? We looked at two friendships that Jesus had. His friendship with Martha. He was coming into Jerusalem. They stopped in Bethany, and he was speaking in Mary and Martha's house. Martha was running all over trying to make accommodations, make food, prepare for the disciples, and basically freaked out when her sister Mary was just sitting and listening to Jesus. And do you remember Jesus' response? He said, "Martha, Martha, you are stressed and worried about all of these things, but there's only one thing that you should be concerned about. It's the thing that Mary's gotten right, and it'll never be taken from her. That's your relationship with me." Right friends, real friends, godly friends will always point you back to Jesus. They will always help set you on the right path. And then we also looked at Jesus' relationship with Lazarus. Remember, he was dead in a tomb. The disciples were losing their mind. And what did he do? He went back and said, "Hey, Lazarus, come out of there." After 4 days of being dead, he brought him back to life. In Lazarus' darkest moment, Jesus didn't leave him alone. He didn't leave him laying there. He actually met him in that moment and brought him life. And that's something that we can do for our friends in godly friendships. Remember the scripture in Ephesians 5? We've been touching on it multiple times the last 2 weeks. It's shown up in one of our devotionals that's on our Instagram page. And it just simply says this: follow God's example as dearly loved children and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself as a sacrifice for us. Man, we can follow the example of God and we can follow the love of Jesus and give ourselves for our friends. That's what godly relationships do. This week, we're going to touch on the next thing about godly friendships, and that's godly friendships allow us to be real. They let us be real. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a whole lot of memories of friendships from middle school. In fact, in this message, I've been racking my brain like, who was my friend? Who did I hang out with? What did I do? And honestly, I had a twin sister who I walked home from school with. We would walk down the Ave. It was about a 15-minute walk to our house, and that's who I walked home with. That's who I hung out with. I went to church with my family. None of my church friends went to my middle school, so I didn't have a whole lot of friends when I was in middle school. But I remember two, Jacob K. and Jacob S. And to be honest with you, we just kind of lived close to one another, but we weren't crazy close with one another. And to be really, really honest with you, we weren't that cool. Okay, we tried to be, we wanted to be, we desperately desired to be. In fact, I wanted to fit in so much, I kind of became a class clown. And our secretary here at the church was actually my 7th grade science teacher. And she has some pretty funny stories about the stupid things that I would do to try to fit in. Man, I did some crazy stuff, but I just wanted to fit in so bad. I lacked identity. I didn't know who I was, and I also didn't have the godly friendships to point me in the right direction. In fact, the one story I can remember about Jacob S. is we were all walking home together, and there was a group of kids picking on him, and kind of the entire way home teasing him, making fun of him, pushing his backpack around, and I didn't do anything to step in. I wasn't a godly friend in that moment to be with him in a low moment because I was terrified for those kids to do that to me too. I didn't want to get made fun of. I didn't want to be pushed around, so I didn't step up and do the right thing, and I still remember that to this day. See, the thing we're going to look at tonight is that in godly friendships, it's more than just being liked. It's about being real, and it's about being loved. The reality is whether you realize it or not, we as human beings desperately want to be loved. We desperately want to fit in, and we all have that in common. In fact, we go out of the way to change who we are so other people will like us. And that is a scary thing. But what's even scarier than that is being real and honest in relationships. Man, doubt comes with that. You ask yourself, man, if I'm real and honest, will people actually like me? If I let people know who I really am, are they going to accept me and love me for who I am? Well, I want to touch on this story in John 4, and it's verse 1 through 29. We've actually spoken on it before in a series about Jesus right here in this auditorium, but I want to look at it from a slightly different way. And it's with Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. See, the Jews and the Samaritans did not get along. In fact, they were cultural enemies. And I can go into a lot to explain that, but they didn't like each other. In fact, they hated one another. Jews did not walk through Samaria because they did not like Samaritans. So Jesus not only went to the town, he sat at the well and he waited. Well, here come this Samaritan woman in the middle of the day where women did not draw water in the middle of the day. So there was something about her life that she was trying to hide. When she showed up, Jesus spoke to her, which in that cultural time was very strange because a single man did not speak to a woman who was not his wife in a public setting. It just didn't happen. They stayed away from each other. So we have a man talking to a woman in public, and we have a Jew talking to a Samaritan, which they were supposed to hate each other. But he went and said, will you get me something to drink? And she was taken back. She says, whoa, hey, why are you talking to me as a Samaritan woman? And why are you asking me for something to drink? And Jesus simply said, if you knew who you were talking to, you would be asking me for a drink of water that brings you life and quenches your thirst for eternity. And Jesus looks at her and basically reads her mail. He says, go get your husband. And she kind of bows her head in shame and says, I don't have a husband. And instantly in one moment, he says, you're right. You've had 5, and the man you're living with is not your husband. Holy smokes, mic drop Jesus, dropping a bomb, reads this lady's mail. But what Jesus did is he got in and he got real and he showed us what it looks like to have a real relationship. He didn't do that in hatred. He didn't do that in condemnation. He said, look, I know all these things about you, but I have still come to bring you life and life more abundantly. I've still come to show you that I'm the Messiah. In fact, in the next few verses, he says, what are you, a prophet? And he says, no, I am the Messiah. She's like, the one that we've been talking about? He says, yes, that's me. And as the story goes on, she runs into the town, tells everybody, you must come see this man who told me everything I've ever done, and you must hear him speak because he's brought me life. And the whole town sat under Jesus' teaching for 2 days. It's an awesome story in the Bible, but what's really cool about it is that Jesus gave her a space and place to be real, and I believe it changed her life for eternity. Jesus has that same gift of friendship that he offered to her in that moment. He has that for us. In fact, he is saying you can be real and you can be loved no matter what. It literally looks like this, to be fully real and fully loved. That is friendship. If you have to hide things in your life from your friends, either they're not the real friends or you're not being a real person. Either you're afraid that they're going to put you back on the right path, or maybe somebody's going to find out that you're doing something wrong, or you're afraid to say, hey, I'm a Christian, I go to church, I can't be watching that, I can't be saying that, I'm not going to tell that joke, I'm not going to make fun of that person. You're afraid to stand up because they might not be a godly friend in your life. Now, I tell you that story and your response is probably, yeah, but that was Jesus, okay? Like he did everything right. But remember the scripture from Ephesians. It says this, follow God's example as dearly loved children. Walk in the way of love just as Christ loved us. He gave himself as a sacrifice for us. We are to walk in the same love that Jesus walked in. We are to follow the godly example that Jesus showed us, and that should affect all of our relationships and all of our friendships. So what does that look like for us? I'm going to give you 4 things that apply to godly relationships and godly friendships, and I'm going to try not to take too long, but we're just going to go through 4 of them. You ready? So get that seatbelt on, hunker down, take a quick sip of Kool-Aid. Here we go. Ready? Quit the judgment. Jesus went to the Samaritan woman on purpose to show the disciples that their judgment of her, of that culture, of those people were wrong. You say, well, Matt, how do you know that? I'm gonna share this scripture with you real quick, which comes up in your small group questions tonight. It's Hebrews 4:13. It says, nothing in creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him whom we must give an account. God sees everything. He knows everything. Jesus knew that that woman would be at the well that day and went out of his way to show her love in a godly friendship. The same way that Jesus went out of his way to die on a cross to show you his love so that you could be a friend of God. Quit the judgment. If you want to be a great friend and have great friendships, choose to listen to other stories just like Jesus did. Jesus heard this woman out, and he didn't say, hey, you're this terrible person. He said, no, I have life for you. I have a way of life that will change you forever. And that's what we can do in our godly friendships. The second one is know who you are. Jesus knew exactly who he was. He didn't change for attention or approval. He didn't need it. He didn't want it. You're like, well, Matt, that was Jesus. Yes, but Ephesians 5:1-2 says we are to live that example. If you missed our Monday Devo, I encourage you to go back to our Instagram page at Sunnybrook_wired and listen to the reading of Psalm 139, or go read it yourself. It says everything that God thinks about you, how he knows you, how he created you, how he wants to have relationship with you. If you don't know who you are, read those scriptures over and over and over again, and you will understand that you are a child of God, created for a great purpose and created to do great things for God. If you have breath in your body, there is hope for you, and God has a plan for you. And if you want to have great and godly friendships, know who you are so you can help others discover who they are. Maybe you have a friend that you need to go through those scriptures together. Maybe you can sit with your parents after this message and just read Psalm 139 or go back and listen to that devotional. But I encourage you to learn who you are and how God sees you. The third one is just be real. If you want a godly, real kind of friendship that everyone wants, I mean, we all want to be loved. Maybe you need to go first. Maybe you need to reach out and say, you know what, I'm going to be the friend that's real and honest and authentic. I'm going to be vulnerable so that my friends can feel the same way with me, and we will get through this together. Like I said before, if you can't be real and vulnerable and honest with your friends, maybe you don't have godly friendships in your life. Maybe you need to look at the friendships that you do have. And the fourth and final one is invite others to be real with you. Don't hide. Come with gentle compassion and encourage others to share with you. You know, if you're struggling in your life, don't ignore it. Don't pretend like everything's okay. I lived so much of my life in a different church pretending that everything was okay, and I was broken, lost, hurting, dying, struggling, and I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about what I was going through, and it damaged me for a long time. Here's the awesome thing about my relationships here at Sunnybrook Church. I was able to be open and honest about my life, just like the woman at the well with Jesus, and I was brought life. I was brought to Jesus, and I was changed forever. And that's not just my story. That can be your story too. So if there is a struggle, do not ignore it. It is a tough topic to jump into. It is tough to talk about things that you're going through, but I encourage you to do it, because again, in those godly friendships and those godly relationships that you have where you can be real, it's about being fully honest and fully loved. And if you can't be fully honest, you're eliminating somebody's ability to love you no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through. If you're not in a place where you feel you can be real and honest, here's 2 things I need you to do. First one is get real with God. I can remember a moment in my life. I was at my old church I used to go to by myself. Lights were dark. and I was crying at the front of the church, which we call the altar in some churches, basically a place where you can meet God, just bawling my eyes out. And I turned to heaven and said, God, you better be worth it. Guess what? He was. I got real and honest with Jesus right in that moment. And I said, here's the things in my life that do not line up with your word. Here's the things that I'm doing wrong. Here's the things I need to change. And guess what? 15 years later, those things have changed. And I have a great relationship with God. Remember, Hebrews 4:13 says, nothing in creation is hidden from God's sight. He already knows. You may think you have things you're hiding from your parents. God knows. You may think you have things you're hiding from your friends or your teachers. God knows. So get real with Jesus and get it right. The second thing is get real with somebody who is close to you right now. I hope that's a parent. I hope you can sit down with your parent and say, hey, look, I'm struggling with some things. I'm lonely. I have anxiety. I don't have an identity. I don't like the way I feel. I don't like the way friends talk to me. I don't fit in at school and I don't know what to do. Be open and honest with your parents and let them love you fully. Let that friendship grow as your friendship grows with God, and that will affect all of your other friendships. But maybe call a friend, grow together, and call a friend and encourage them to be open and honest with their parent. But be open and honest. Get real with Jesus and get real with somebody close to you. Wouldn't it be incredible if all of your friendships were places where you could be totally real and totally loved? Well, they can be. And if you can't in those friendships, maybe those friendships need to change. But I encourage you to set the example, be the first to be real. Remember, we can live the example of God. We can live the example of Jesus, and we can be fully known, fully loved, fully real, and fully loved. I'm praying for you. I know that friendships can be hard. I know that relationships are tough across the board, especially at your age. Like I said before, I didn't have many friendships when I was in middle school, but I am thankful for the path that God took me on so I could share those stories with you today. Isn't it awesome, just like at the Woman of the Well, that you can talk to Jesus and say, look, here's everything about me. And he can say, yes, and I love you, and I have a plan for you. My life I give you can never be taken away. Give those things over to God, and I encourage you to take a step and be real, honest, and vulnerable with your parent and grow in that friendship first, and God will help change all of those other relationships as this relationship is worked out in the right way. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you so much for learning about lifelines and friendships with us. We have one more message in this series next Wednesday, and I cannot wait to share it with you because it's something I'm very passionate about. I'm praying for you. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you soon.